operations. He also teaches process improvement, project management, change management for government and business. Eric has worked with cities of Renton, Yakima, Snohomish County, and the Kennewick Fire Department. He is currently authoring an open education resource textbook on clinical informatics for the Washington State Board of Community and Technical Colleges. Thank you so much for being with us, Eric. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. I am wearing my hat just as a tribute to Halloween. I'm going to go ahead and take that off so that I don't get too distracted about being a pirate today. So let me share my screen and I'll launch into my presentation here. Talia, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Looks good.
Excellent. I'm ready to go. So my name is Eric, and I am a teacher, professor, author. My love for Agile was really spurred a couple of years ago when I was teaching for the UW, and there was an introduction to Agile, and I really became enamored with a lot of the principles that were in there. And so I've been using these as teaching materials within my program. And a few months ago, me and Talia were talking back and forth, and she suggested that I bring some of the Agile principles to this community. So I got inspired. I put together a presentation. And so here I am to kind of show you some lean principles. Let me move this around. Go. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what is Agile. I'm not going to go too deep. You're going to see a lot of things in the slide that are a lot of good information about Agile. I really want to keep that as kind of a high level and talk about the basic process of Agile, the different functions that are in Agile. But the screen, you're going to be able to go back to the screen for a lot of the resources, a lot of the terminology, and a lot of the specifics about each one of these methods and the types of Agile approaches that are out there. And then I'm going to talk about 5 different methodologies that are embedded in Agile: work, metrics, communication, teams, and leadership. Now, I went through and I created this little diagram to kind of show that each one of these methodologies is really interconnected with all the rest of with all the methodologies. And so we're going to be following this wheel around as we go through this presentation. So to start off, Agile is not one specific thing. Yeah, you may have heard that Agile is Scrum, or Agile is extreme programming, or Agile is a specific type of approach. Agile is a whole set of methodologies. It's kind of like Lean in a lot of ways. There's no one way of doing Leans. There's many ways of doing Lean, and there's many ways of doing Agile. And a lot of them are very complementary for each other. The things we're focused on over in Agile is being flexible, focusing on value in the customer, and also focusing on teams and how the teams interact. And so these are the themes you're going to see coming through this methodology. So when I first got into Agile, I was looking at it as another form of project management. Back when I was helping manage as a black belt for Providence, I worked cataloging some of the projects that some of the belts had. Some of them fit very well into the project management software called Instantis. Some of them did not. And looking back, these were more Agile type of projects, which don't fit the traditional project management model. The traditional project management model looks at getting to a specific goal through a series of steps. Agile doesn't necessarily have that straight line toward a specific goal, but it's more iterative, where it takes different steps and manages small batches at a time. And so you're looking at sequencing on priority in sequence instead of trying to lay it out all at the beginning. So whenever I teach project management, I say there are 4 specific parts of project management that you need to pay attention to. First is time, being able to manage your time through a schedule. The second is cost, being able to have a budget and being able to define all the costs throughout the project. then going through and managing risk through a risk log or a risk register, and then managing quality through testing. You start off with a set of plans and you end with a finished product. Back in the 70s, software designers were really hampered by a lot of the project management processes. There was just too much documentation. And what happened is they started really pushing back on the project management processes. Waterfall was kind of meant to be sort of a slam against project management. And so when you hear that term waterfall, it's now kind of what traditional project management is, but it doesn't fit the model of innovation and development that is needed in the software industries. So you would start off with predicting one thing and you end up with another, which in the software industry is sometimes what you want to have happen. You want to meet the customer where they need. So it's hard to predict using this type of methodology that goes from one step to next step to next step. And it becomes rather restrictive for developers. The mental model that I give between traditional project management and Agile is that if we're building a house, we have to start off with the foundation. We go to the walls. We have to do it in a stepwise manner that's very specific sequence to get to the end of the house. We start off with an idea. We get that idea approved. We plan, and then we work the plan. And when we get to the end, we make sure we've met the requirements. Over on the right, that's more of the remodels that once the house is done, there's things I can do in the dining room. There's patio furniture. I can be painting. And based on the time that I have for the weekend, I might find that I might do painting first because that's something that's highest priority. But then if the sink explodes in the middle of the week, I might take that and work on that this weekend instead of the painting. And my project, it doesn't do anything to my project plan. And so we do these series of sprints of these small batches of work to be able to manage the work that we have. And so that's kind of the mental model I have between them: sequence work versus prioritized work. In 2001, a group of software individuals got together and they tried to figure out what is the secret? What do development need to go forward? And so they came up with a manifesto, a series of requirements and values that are needed. Now, one of the things that's interesting here is that they came in with the term lightweight methods. And in fact, lean was one of the proposed names for this. At one point, lean was brought up. And lean is part of this process. And so during this time, there's a real focus on people, but there's also a focus on processes and focusing on getting what the customer wants. So when I teach lean, lean is a series of different types of methodologies. And let me quickly go through the different types of methodologies at a really high level. First is the Scrum and the Sprint. This is how work is managed, where work is taken at a big level and brought down to smaller chunks so that they're managed on a daily basis. Scrum is that daily focus, and Sprint is chopping work into smaller pieces so that it can be managed in small batches. The Kanban board is an example of radical transparency. So that people see what's going on. They immediately know. Another term that's used in this realm is information radiator. We want to make sure that people are up to speed on what's happening at any one time. Extreme programming, or XP, focuses on the team, learning from each other, being able to do coding and programming as a combined unit, as a team, and not just individuals, but having activities where people work together. Process-driven agile processes. We have feature-driven development, which focuses on what the customer wants. Test-driven development, which focuses on the type of tests that deliver what people want. Dynamic system development methodology, the DSDM, is really that whole range of the types of processes that deliver to the customer exactly what they want. Crystal methods define the type of work depending on the basis of the team, the criticality, and the priority of the project. And so different project approaches will be given to different sizes of teams. Lean developer, lean startup is how we start over in Agile. We start quickly. We start with as least amount of documentation as possible. We try to get it going and reduce as many steps as we can, reduce that waste right from the onset during that innovative process. And then one of the challenges for Agile is that there's a focus on small teams, and large companies that have big projects need to be able to coordinate the work. One of the ways is to scrum of scrums, where one person from each one of the scrums goes to another scrum, goes to another meeting to let people know how things are going. The safest scaled agile framework, where you're taking and making a project into different chunks so that they fit the agile processes. DAD is disciplined agile delivery, which is what PMI is promoting as their package on delivering big projects using disciplined agile. LESS is large scale Scrum, which uses parallel projects to make sure people are in coordination. And Nexus is kind of a coordinated 6 to 9 type of scrums getting together at specific times to produce a goal. These are all different ways that companies are trying to get everyone together, but really the focus is on the small group. There's some organizations that combine methods. We see here this diagram from the Gartner Group, where they put innovation, Lean Six Sigma, and Agile together so that they show how these things flow together. So there's companies that kind of merge agile processes with other types of process improvement. Now, this is a criticism. This is a website from Craig Smith, who is a Australian agile expert. And he complains that there's a lot of different flavors of agile, which creates a lot of confusion for people. At the time of this publication, he said that there's over 70 different types of agile methods, and the number keeps increasing. So we have a problem here where Agile is all these different things. Yes, Agile is Scrum. Yes, Agile is Kanban. And sometimes they've even combined it into names like Scrumbon. And so even some of the Agile experts are going, this is too much. There are too many different things. Too far. There we go. But if we focus on the basics, the focus that come from the Agile Manifesto, iterations and sprints, being able to manage the work in the small batches, having open workspace, and I'm going to describe what that means, because some of the models for open workspace do not match the Agile model. Retrospectives, getting people to learn, big visible charts, customer collaborations, and daily stand-up meetings result in a faster, change-friendly, value-focused, risk-managed process that delivers high products. And we're going to be going through the list on the left through each one of our methodologies. So the first thing I want to talk about is agile work. How does that happen? The secret to agile work is working in small batches. Big batches become unmanageable. So working in small batches allows people to focus on what they're doing. And the way that happens is we step down. The first 3 ceremonies here are really the ceremonies that are needed to go from a big vision down to that 2-week focus, down to that daily activity. The next 2, daily planning and daily scrums, these are the daily things that you're doing based on a smaller work set. And then when you're done, you go through and you make sure it gets done right, that the team has learned, and that the work is reprioritized so that you're doing things in the next iteration that those have a high priority. I've also asked it in they add in experimentation through these things called risk spikes, which are really meant to manage risk at a very narrow level. This is the diagram that I use where I take that project vision and come down to a product roadmap. You can be thinking about this of your life. What is your big vision? What is your roadmap to get there? What are you going to do in the next 3 months? What's that release plan? What's the next big step, the next big milestone? And then once you have that milestone, breaking that down into the things you need to do in the next 10 days. And that becomes our iteration plan. That becomes our next set of things we do. And then once we have that 10-day plan, then we work the plan. We work it day by day. Now, this is the secret sauce. This is the secret sauce of Agile, is the product backlog. And all this is a prioritized list of things to do. Now, when I kind of made that understanding of what the terminology was all about, the backlog is really that list, and we're working through that list of things to do. We're taking the highest priority things and doing them first, which makes sense. And then we're working down the list. Now, once we've worked those high priority things, we go back and check to make sure that we still have high priority things to do. So when we have our list of things of about 10 days worth of work, we have that as our input. And we've decided this is how much work we're doing. This is the velocity. This is what needs to be done. And in the middle here, the team that does the work decides how it's going to get that work done in 10 days. And then they go through, and their output is the deliverables from that prioritized list. The focus on small batches is a secret here, is focusing on not getting too big, focusing on getting to done. And the technical debt is, if things are left undone, having a way to quickly be able to take care of those instead of letting them hang on. And so what happens is that by focusing on smaller batches, by having that agreement of we're going to get this done, you're able to focus, have flow without the interruptions. And so this becomes a much more productive way of working. After the work is complete, which is really cool, is that they meet. The lessons learned aren't done and closed. They're done every single time you get through an iteration. What did we learn in the last 2 weeks? What can we apply going forward? What a great way for teams to communicate. So the 3 things that happen is, number 1, check to make sure you did what you're supposed to do. Is it correct? Did the product or service, the things that you said you're going to do, were those right? And then check in the team, making sure the team, what did the team learn? Was there any lessons we can carry forward? Or is there anything we would want to change? And then checking to make sure that we're working on highly prioritized work. If something came up that isn't prioritized, we drop that to the bottom of the list. Now, here's the lessons. Here's the takeaway, is that if you are trying to be agile, have a backlog, build your prioritized list. Anything that's not a priority goes to the bottom of the list. Work on those things that are high priority. Manage your time and work in small batches. And then as life comes through, add things to the top of the list that are highly prioritized. Focus on value. Focus on on what you need. Now, what I've done here is for one of my self-guided classes, I have a personal backlog worksheet that you can use. You're just flowing through this in identifying on the left here, you're identifying your important projects, your life goals, and your current topics. These might be things that are coming out of your inbox. The next column is, what is the next step that needs to happen? And then figuring out the priority. Anything with too lower priority, put that down into the parking lot. And then everything else, recreate this list from this left over onto the right, but change everything so that the highest priority is on top and less priority as you go. Then choose the things to work in the next 2 weeks, figure out your process of keeping on track, and then at the end of 2 weeks, describe how you're doing. What do you want to keep doing? what are the things that aren't working, and what are some things to try. So this is your own personal backlog worksheet that you can use. The next topic is about metrics. Metrics really drive. And if you are Six Sigma or data analytics or like me, metrics are your friend to figure out how to make sure you've made an improvement. And so we start off with keeping the agile metrics as simple as possible, being able to focus on what the customer wants, but being able to manage our work and telling how far we are in our work. It should be easy to collect and easy to understand. Now, here's some example of agile metrics that I have from the literature: is velocity, cycle time, work in progress. You can post these things up. But Steve Denning, who talks in the Age of Agile, he talks about moving from the Copernicus model over to something that's more customer centric. And so he looks at one point, the Earth used to be the center of the universe, and they moved the sun into be the center. And so in his model, he's go from organizational metrics to customer metrics as being the center of your metrics. Metrics aren't always quantitative. They don't always flow down into numbers. You need to pay attention to qualitative metrics, descriptive types of things. Now, I'll throw out another resource: is Effective Data Visualization by Stephanie Evergreen. She specifically dives into how to report and analyze qualitative metrics. And so one of the ways to build qualitative metrics is describing what customers want and being able to work toward those qualitative metrics, because sometimes we can't quantify things. Sometimes what we want is more of a description than a number. So using user stories to be able to describe what people want. I love the power of estimation when I talk about Agile. Agile is a little bit more realistic than some of the things that I teach over in the project management side. Project management tends to be really focused on the numbers, being able to use top-down or bottom-up estimating using real live numbers. With agile estimating, they're using more of realistic terms and t-shirt sizes. I love t-shirt sizing. Is that job about a day? Does it take about 2 days? Then schedule 2 days to do it. Schedule 1 day to do it. Because sometimes it's hard to figure out, does a 5-hour job and a 2-hour job fit into 1 day? But if you have t-shirt sizes, you know how many t-shirts fit into a day. It's really a nice way to be able to estimate using those relative sizes. So in measuring success, keeping score, focusing on the customer, and estimate using relative sizes, those are my takeaways there. Now, getting into communication, we're going to carry that whole theme of metrics, and it's all about keeping score and letting everyone know. If you've been to a ball game or any sort of sports game, they put the scoreboard on the wall so you can see what's happening, and that scoreboard is instantaneously updated. You want the same thing to happen in your project. You want to see what's going on, which means that everybody has to contribute. Everybody has to keep the scoreboard up to date. And so things like dashboards, being able to see it all on the screen, or seeing them up on a board, or using that Kanban board to manage the work is 3 ways to include radical transparency. Now, I really focus a lot of my work in data analytics in trying to get people to use more of the visual thinking approaches. If you can use data visualization to see what's going on, you're going to be able to engage a different part of your brain. You see things holistically instead of having to do it sequentially. The example that I have is that on the top right, we could probably figure out from the numbers which is higher and which is lower. But if we shift our gaze down to the graph, we can immediately see our eyes take in and figure out what's the highest wait time based on the size of that bar. And so our brains work differently when it has visual information. And so to be able to keep score, to be able to have those metrics so that people can understand them, you need to be able to express them and see them at any given time. An example that I had before is I showed some metrics of some examples of burn rates and cycle times. This is what you would see on a dashboard where the line would be, this is the goal, and then the curvy line, the solid line, was how we're doing. You can immediately see how things are going when everybody contributes to a board like this. If we're using a Kanban board, it gives us the ability to use visual management to be able to limit the amount of work, to keep the small batches in place, and also see what's going on, to see where work needs to happen. So if we go to choose the next work, we can immediately go to the Kanban and see what needs to happen next. It's really a great way to be radically transparent. And so the takeaway from communications is to be radically transparent. Keep everything out there. Keep score and show everybody, and keep it up to date so that everybody knows what the score is. The next part is agile teams. And agile teams is really kind of that secret sauce in agile. This is one of the things that I really found to be very interesting. And there's a lot between agile teams and agile leadership. There's a lot of information in here. So one of the things from Denise Canty's book, Agile for Project Managers, she talks about collaboration, communication, and commitment. All the rest of the literature talks about high-performing teams, and I'm kind of going to go over traits of these things, but things to pick out when we're talking about Agile. So an Agile team has been defined as dedicated people, co-located, cross-functional, and they've given the term generalizing specialists. This came up during the creation of the Agile Manifesto. Is one of the experts that came to the table, that was his big thing, is generalizing specialists, people that had a wide range, but also had expertise in a specific area. And then creating a stable work environment. Now, that creating that stable work environment, I'll describe a little bit more what that means when we start getting into what's kind of the softer skills. But in a high-performing team, there's a shared value, purpose, or really they're all on the same page. Again, there's a small team and a defined team space. And I want to kind of unpack that a little bit in a few slides from here. Recognize skill set. And that's another thing that we need to be radically transparent about in terms of how we're identifying strengths and skills of others. Promoting team learning and demonstrating emotional intelligence. Again, I'm going to unpack that in a few slides here. So we see from the Scrum Alliance, from Agile Alliance, these are the core values. And these core values are really driven by a shared vision, by a aligned purpose. And when we start to see the ability not only to be able to be told, we have some input on this, we have feedback, there's openness and communication, so that shared vision isn't something that is delivered, but it's something that we can align to through discussion and being able to have mutual respect for each other. So there's a focus on purpose. There's also a focus on small teams. And the reason that is that there's overhead in large teams. There's a communication overhead. The number of communication channels between two people is just one, there's just one channel. And between 5 people, there's 10 different channels. But if we were to have a team of 12, there's 66 different channels that are present between those 12 people. That creates a lot of overhead, that slows down communication, that's harder to manage. A smaller team is easier to manage and communicate with each other. And that communicating with each other becomes a key skill within Agile teams. So Agile teams are co-located. Now, I kind of got to look at this whole idea that's been brought up by organizations of the open workspace. We're going to tear out the cubicle walls. I think that they're being a little bit premature about how this happens, because that whole co-location doesn't necessarily have to be in the same room. Agile teams are also co-located virtually as well. They have a constant connection through Zoom or other types of virtual media so that they are connected. They don't necessarily have to be in the same room. There's minimal distractions, which with some open environments, there's a lot of noise going on. It's really meant to be that they're co-located and focused on the work so that the distractions, outside distractions, are at a minimum. Area for stand-ups so that you can have a daily scrum and check in with people so that people can have that huddle during the day to make sure they're on track, get any help that they need, and also do some learning with each other. So having that space and allowing for tacit communication. When you're with somebody, learning from them at the elbow, not being told, not being lectured, but simply watching what they're doing or overhearing through osmotic communication. Now, consider that doesn't happen unless people are open to it, unless you have the right emotional openness to be able to share that information and to be able to give that information. So that becomes the next part of the team environment. So instead of looking at putting people in an open room, look at the environment of how people are interacting with each other. Is it safe for people to experiment, to share their ideas, to be diverse? To be open and collaborative means there has to be an agreement of safety, that people need to know how to talk and listen and have diversity of thinking. This is really important in creativity. And when we're talking about innovative and creative type of environments, we need to be able to share knowledge and actively listen, but there needs to be safety and building trust. And I'm going to dive into accountability when we get into leadership, but that accountability is that ownership of what you're doing. Team learning is especially important. Peter Senge talks about this in the fifth discipline, where learning organizations, teams learn together. And the important thing to understand is that each team is different. Each team has a different learning style. The individuals have a learning style. The team itself, the small team, has a learning style. There are specific needs that that team needs that other teams don't necessarily need. Motivation is different for different people. And if you try to motivate people the same way, provide the same type of recognition and rewards for all teams, some is going to land and some is not. So it really has to be unique and specific for that team to get into the right type of team learning. Now, this is what I thought was great, is that the skills are posted where we get back into that radical transparency. We have metrics around what people know, what are their strengths, so that we can see. And so if I need a strength, or if I need a skill, or if I need knowledge for someone, I know who to go to. And if we're trying to learn together, we know where our gaps in learning are because it's there on a team board that has the skill inventory. And it's not just skills, it's not just the hard skills, but it's the emotional type, the personality type of skills. In the bottom left is the widget model from 6 Working Geniuses that propose that you really need to have these 6 types of personality in the room to have a really good, innovative team. In the middle, we have the MBTI, where people understand what their own type is, and they know what other types are, so they know how to interact. So the extroverts and introverts understand each other and can communicate to each other on the same team. And the one on the right side is strength finders, the being able to identify what your strengths are and then put it up on a board, make it visible so that people know what our strengths are and know who the go-to person is when we're talking about things that they need. A retrospective Kanban board, this is something I embedded in the worksheet, is a way for teams to learn is to take a moment and ask, what are the things that are working? What are the things that aren't working? And what are the things we want to try? So this becomes a discussion type of format for people to be able to share knowledge. Now, some of those team traits, now we start getting into some of the softer skills, but are highly valued in agile teams. Being able to talk together, listen together, negotiate, resolve conflicts, embrace diversity. These all are functions that have to do with communication and personality, understanding each other. Now, when I talk about emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman has kind of coined that term. When I teach it, I look at it as a skill that you need to have that's inward looking, that you need to understand what are you self-aware of your own emotional state? And can you manage that emotional state? Do you have self-management? Do you understand that others have different emotional states and how to recognize them, how to be aware of other people and their needs, and then being able to talk and have relationships with others that have different emotional states than you do? That's kind of this quick breakdown of emotional intelligence, but is really critical on one of those agile teams. So to quickly summarize on an agile team, we're talking about shared values and diversity of thinking. But there's also, besides a shared purpose, that there really needs to be that people need to be able to work together. There needs to be a space for people together, and there needs to be skills that teams are able to work together, that they have that trust and that communication, and that they can demonstrate that emotional intelligence. Oh, there we go. Darn it. Keep clicking the button real hard. So the last part of the reel I want to work into is leadership. This is kind of the last part, and this is kind of the foundational part. Now, I've been teaching leadership since the late 90s, and there's a whole palette of leadership traits. I'm going to focus on 5 here: leading, managing, governance, coaching and mentoring, and sponsorship. So to kind of give the broad view of leadership in the agile universe is that there's this idea of the hierarchical organization, that decisions are made from leaders and it's passed down through the organization. Over in agile, they have more of a flat organization. There's distributed decision making, and we go from a bureaucratic to a self-managing, self-organizing type of team. Now, self-managing and self-organizing team in some people's mind feels like chaos. Holy cow, we're all managing ourselves. We're going to be running around not knowing what we're doing. It's different than that. And I'll start to break that down and get to that self-managing part. But when it's first put out there, people are kind of worried about what self-managing and self-organizing means. So let me start with leadership. Leadership is that ability to make decisions and get people inspired and bring in purpose. The transactional leadership style is really kind of baked into a lot of organizations. The org chart, the way people get paid and promoted, and performance is really based on that whole hierarchical type of structure. And so transactional type of leadership, where leader as expert and leader as boss really are promoted. And it creates these bureaucratic relationships where there's a rule structure and there's a power structure, a control structure behind it. On the right side, we see transformational leadership styles, where the leaders are more servants, they're more supportive of their organization, or they're there to gather the information and bring it together so that the team makes the decision. Servant leader and adaptive leadership are two types of transformational types of leadership. Servant leadership, as it stands, is really kind of a supportive type of leadership. It's the leaders there to support the team, to support and guide the team. They're not there to be the dictator. They're there to be the gardener. And over on adaptive side, adaptive or situational leadership is that they recognize that the team is in different stages and they're there to develop the team, to guide the team and to develop the team to grow to a mature model. Come on. There. Management is about how people do things. And this is from the Steve Denning's book, The Age of Agile. I pulled these out. I think this is a really good list. He specifically talks about the way things are managed is transparent and empowered, is that the people that do the work have a say. They're able to see what's going on and they're able to say how the work gets managed. There's a view of competency that people are treated as people, that their expertise is recognized and promoted, that each team is different and unique, and you can't use one size fits all. Motivation is about positive reinforcement, is how to engage people using rewards and recognition. And finally, building in that accountability. And again, I'm going to come back to that accountability and focus in on that in a minute. So leaders need to be able to manage meetings in terms of the content. They need to actively manage the meetings so that there's a purpose for the meetings and that there's agenda and that things happen. But down on the bottom part of it is that transformational leadership. They need to be able to know how to facilitate, how to get people engaged, how to empower people, how to clarify by active listening and encouraging everybody to have an open mind. And so the leader becomes the guide and facilitator during these meetings so that the group itself works as a whole. Now, I found this really interesting. This was another thing that came from Steve Denning, was that the view of strategy is changed in an agile organization. In a traditional organization, the leaders think of this is the direction we want to go, and they tell the operations there we want to go. In organizational agility or an agility view, innovation or new ideas become the new future. They become the way that we're going to use. And so we use lean startup on those new ideas to create the strategy for the future. So instead of having leadership tell operations what to do, new ideas from operations define the path. Accountability. This is my favorite thing when I'm talking about people. Accountability is that ownership. We see it in those people that are engaged in work, that do the right, that are leaning into work, that are the action people. This is something that is encouraged and grown through mutual accountability. When leaders are mutually accountable with the people they work with, everybody takes part. And so you start to build things like self-efficacy, can-do attitude, growth mindset, learning from mistakes, and action and entrepreneurship. So that whole accountability, you know, an accountable worker because they're leaning in and learning as they go. Governance has also changed in Agile. Instead of going with the rules govern what we do. We drive down to the group and we create team norms so that the team understands, the team writes the rules for themselves, and then they're also accountable for those rules. They manage themselves much better at a team level when they create their own set of rules around this. So governance shifts more toward a self-organizing, self-directing. This is where the secret sauce of self-directing and self-organizing comes in. They make the rules, but if you can let a team make the rules that make sense, they follow those rules, they hold themselves accountable instead of a leader having the police rules coming in. So there we go. Leadership. There's a huge body of knowledge about learning in agile teams. Agile teams are constantly learning. They're constantly figuring out the skills they need. They're constantly learning on how to improve from one iteration to the next. Leadership needs to support that type of learning. They need to be coaches. The leaders need to be able to watch the team, give feedback, be able to encourage, and they also need to be mentors. They also need to be a source of information. If somebody needs help, that leader either becomes the expert or they find whoever needs to be mentored so that that mentoring gets set up. And there needs to be an encouragement of the open mind that mistakes can happen, that we can try different things. That whole idea of learning from our mistakes is a big paradigm shift for some organizations, especially the ones that really criticize the mistakes that happen. The final aspect of leadership that I want to talk about is sponsorship. And I talk about this in my project. The leader kind of is accountable and responsible for all the projects because they're responsible for the resources and the decisions. They have the authority and approval. And since they're the captain of that, they need to be able to act like that. And so they need to be invested in whatever the team is doing. They need to act as if this is important because that's a high motivating factor. They need to hold the group accountable. And if there's rewards for good behavior and consequences for not meeting the behavior, those need to be managed and promoted. The sponsor really needs to act like the owner, that they ultimately own these things. They need to be able to guide the team and show and be able to provide motivation to people. And they do that through metrics, which are aligned with the goals of the organization and the outcomes that are happening. So what needs to happen on Agile leadership is to shift the script, is to go from transactional to be more transformational, be more supportive, from control to facilitate, be more engaging and be more encouraging, from bureaucratic rule following to self-organizing and self-manage, have the group make the rules, telling and directing to teaching, coaching, and mentoring, be open-minded about these things. And instead of expecting compliance, building mutual accountability. So this kind of brings us around the wheel. The Agile work helps the Agile metrics helps the Agile work. You can see where you're at any one time. The communication is how we see the metrics and stay on track. The Agile team takes those metrics. They use that small batches of work to be able to be a small team and learn from each other. And Agile leadership supports all these different aspects. Now, what I've done here is I've put on some of the different resources that I've used to help build this. One of the points I looked at now is that I want to bring up Drive as far as Dan Pink. The 3 values that he brings up in Drive is mastery, which Agile teams have mastery. They're continuing getting better. They have autonomy. They are able to come up with their own rules, and they have purpose. That's a guiding factor in all the Agile types of teams. Thank you for letting me share what I've come up with on Agile. There's still lots for me to learn, but I wanted to share this knowledge with you.
Awesome, Eric. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. I love all the visuals. You got a lot of good questions in the Q&A. So some of them are a little bit shorter than others, so maybe I'll start with those. Quick question. Can you have a 3-month sprint?
Yes, you can have a 3-month sprint, but it's the value of having the short 10-day sprints is it's easier to manage what's happening. You can imagine what you're going to be doing next Thursday. Or can you imagine what you're going to be doing on January 6th? Okay. You have more control over what's going on next Thursday than you do over in December and January. It's possible, but it's easier to manage in smaller chunks.
All right. So in alignment with that, this next question, 10 days is a short time period. How do you execute strategic initiatives requiring many cooks in the kitchen?
So that whole idea of chunking it down, okay, being able to chunk down your strategic, if you've got a strategic initiative, chunk it down into smaller parts. What's going to, that 3 months or that 6 month, and then what are all of the activities that need to be that need to happen in that next 3 months or 6 months, and then managing small bites. Now, if you have lots of different teams, then that scaled organization that they talked about, using small teams that have a coordinated person running back and forth, or at best, leaders that coordinate this, leaders that are able to talk and let the small teams focus on the important stuff.
Yes, and as you're talking, I'm thinking of the chunking it out and, what can you do now? What's on hold? What's the lowest hanging fruit? And that's making me think of getting things done. And there's a question that someone asks, where is the getting things done framework in the agile ecosystem?
Getting things done, that actually, what's funny is that my inbox presentation on getting things done came from it actually fed that whole backlog worksheet that I have.
Mm.
Is you're working on things, you're prioritizing those things you can get rid of right away, get rid of them right away, answer them back. Those things that need to be prioritized, the important things, then you go through and you do the important thing first. This takes a little bit broader view of that, where you're not only looking at your inbox and getting things done, but you're looking at your life goals and your work goals, the big things that happen in life. And you have to be able to manage life goals, work goals, and daily goals in kind of the same list. And I see a product worksheet, a life product backlog as a way to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Oh, that's a good one. What skills would you say are necessary for IT project managers?
The the whole learning curve about um, being able to focus on teams, being able to understand how to measure the team effectiveness. What are their skills? What are their strengths? How do teams work together? Um, that work in Agile has really bubbled up to the top. And I see this as kind of a deficiency over in Lean. Lean is, when I teach Lean, there's a lot of focus on the work, and in Agile, I got sucked into a lot of you had to understand how you work together as a team really well, which means that you have to be radically transparent of what that team looks like. What are the specific skills? What are the strengths? And then keep coming back to it. Lessons learned can't be done at the end of the project. They're done all the time so that there's this constant flow of learning. So as an IT project manager, I would focus on how do I get myself to learn and how do I get others to learn on things like emotional intelligence, skill building, strength building, sharing ideas, stuff like that.
Wonderful. Thank you. And this last question, because there are so many good ones. I'm so sorry, folks. We can't get to all of them. I'm getting close on time, but there are a few with this reoccurring theme. So, how do you suggest organizations that have historically been very bureaucratic with traditional management who don't really want to hear out the folks' ideas? How do you suggest that they shift in a meaningful way to self-organizing and self-managing?
Okay. So my work on culture, the work on company culture, there is one lever that works the best is education and training. Okay. That's, and especially if you can train everybody coming in to a specific type of way of doing things, a type of method. Now, bureaucratic organizations tend to have long lead times, getting them to say, okay, we're going to learn about managing in small batches. If we're all learning on how to manage in small batches, we're applying what we're doing. That's probably going to be the best lever to shift the culture from bureaucracy to start to get down to smaller teams and focus work.
Wonderful. Thank you. You've got some thank yous also in the Q&A. This has been such an awesome presentation. What would we do without you? Thank you, Eric. All
Thank you so
right. Well,
much.
it was wonderful information. And I know that somebody also mentioned that they will go back and refer and peruse the materials later. So yeah, don't forget to do that, folks. You can download this information and look at it again. So thank you, Eric, for a great session. Thank you, Kelly, for our ASL interpretation. Thank you, Nicole, for our CART captioning. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning, for all those great questions. There's more of the conference to come. Today's the last day, so visit results.wa.gov if you want to sign up for our last couple sessions, if you want to rewatch any sessions that have already been posted, or again, download copies of those materials. And please don't forget to fill out the survey. We definitely want to get your real-time feedback. Let us know how valuable this session was for you so we can share it with Eric, and we can also take a look at it ourselves. But other than that, you have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you again, Eric. Always great to have you.
Thank you.